Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for another YouTube video. Allincrypto here, and today we are going to be talking about Cardano and Africa. Now, many of you will remember that in 2021 there was lots of talk in regards to what Cardano was doing in Africa, mostly headed up by John O'Connor, who is the head of RealFi over at IOG. Since then, it's gone rather quiet. Up until recently, just the other day, John O'Connor appeared on a panel to talk about fintech in Africa, obviously as the head of RealFi for IOG. In this video, I want to be diving into what was said during that panel, and we are going to start this video off by just talking about why Africa is so significant in this technological revolution, and not just significant, but very well positioned to benefit from it. Ladies and gentlemen, how many applications in the crypto space do you know that even have 1 million users? Not classing staking services, liquid staking services. We see them be very popular. But if you look at the applications that are being built on top of blockchain, it is few and far between that these applications have seen real traction. This is something, and one reason why I'm very bullish on the crypto space, that I think we are still to see. If you think about really what excelled the internet, it was those killer applications that brought the masses to the internet. The same thing is applicable with the blockchain and crypto space. We are still looking to see applications, and I think there's going to be many of them in the coming years. Certainly this year alone, I think we'll see really rise with GameFi and things like this. But ultimately, we are still really waiting to see those killer applications. And I think that the way that Cardano are handling Africa is positioning them in a very good spot to see those killer applications that see millions of users come online and millions of value. And in this video, we're going to be looking at why Africa is so important and what John O'Connor for IOG and Cardano is doing over there. So without further ado, guys, let's dive into the first clip from the panel, which is going to help us to understand why Africa is so important.
I just want to start the conversation off with a couple of stats about Africa and fintech. First of all, I'm excited about Africa and fintech. I'm excited about what's happening and what's to come, the future we're discussing today with these expert panelists. So let's start with some stats for us to absorb and reflect upon. And we had some sessions today on Africa investing, and so you may have heard some of this, but I just want to double click on it. By 2050, 1 out of 4 people on the planet will be African. Africa has the youngest population in the world, with a median age right now of 18.8 years old. The World Bank and the African Development Bank report there are 650 mobile users in Africa, surpassing the US and Europe. In some African countries, of which there are 54, more people have access to mobile phones than to clean water, a bank account, or electricity. So the mobile, digital space is a lifeline, a connection to products, services, and to the world, and to markets. McKinsey reports that Africa is responsible for 70% of the world's mobile money transactions. More than 50% of VC funding in Africa goes towards fintech. So we're in the right place here. And unicorns are rare. It's hard to come by unicorns. But out of the 7 African unicorns, 6 are fintechs. InterSwitch, OPay, Chipper, Wave, Flutterwave, and the newest unicorn is Egypt's MNT, ALLIN, which 200 million of investment came from Abu Dhabi, right here.
So I think that was a really good place to start, because that kind of really outlines the importance of Africa from a point of adopting a new technology. 70% of remittance markets come from Africa alone. In the year, I think she said 2050, 1 in 4 people will be African. And ultimately, you have this really interesting dynamic in many of the countries within Africa where people actually have access to mobile phones and the internet technology more so than they do necessities like running water and things like this. And this kind of sets them up this sets Africa as a continent and the people within it up to be some of the largest beneficiaries of this technology. And ultimately, to my point at the start of the video, we're still waiting to see those applications that attract and see traction to the tune of millions of users. And I actually think we're going to see a lot of those coming from Africa. We have covered, she mentioned a number of unicorns there, Flutterwave, which is doing some interesting things with Hedera, and you know, the Bank of Ghana and all this sort of stuff. So Africa is a continent that we're very interested in. We're very interested in how technology as a whole changes the world, from the agricultural revolution to where we are today with blockchain and AI. And actually, Africa is one of probably the most primed continents to see adoption of blockchain technology.
So I'm maybe a little bit different from, you know, the rest of the illustrious panel, in that the way in which I got into building a business to support fintechs across the continent actually started with crypto and with blockchain. We've actually got the IOG or Cardano team here today with us, but after Charles had left Ethereum and went to set up a new crypto venture, which became Cardano, still a top 10 cryptocurrency, very quickly we started to realize that to deliver on the promise of these decentralized technologies, which was always to push power to the edges, to build infrastructure that can be used by anyone, that we'd actually have to work on some real world projects. So because of that, I moved to Ethiopia, where we started to work with the government on digital identity projects. And that was really our focus for a number of years. By extraction, my mother's Ethiopian, hence Ethiopia. You know, South America also could have been a good option, but I'm not sure that was on the cards for me. And over that experience, you know, we really started to understand the deep needs of these fantastic fintech companies who really understood their local market segment, who could underwrite better than any international competitor, but were still banging their heads against the wall daily over their inability to access finance, and particularly their inability to access scalable, non-dilutive finance. And that's really the origination for our business, RealFi. We are a platform to connect up institutional investors with private credit opportunities across the continent, working primarily with fintechs. So we speak to a lot of fintechs, and you know, we feel like we've got a pretty good idea of their needs and their growth story.
Yeah, and of course, we covered the Ethiopia deal when it came out, which was essentially, I think, using Prism to provide identity. It was with the educational system of Ethiopia, or a certain arm of it. And since then, we've really not heard that much from IOG specifically and what they were trying to do within the continent of Africa. However, we have seen Cardano impact parts of Africa with the likes of what World Mobile are doing, Empower, and a number of others. So again, you know, Africa is very important in the technological race for a number of reasons that we've just covered. Let's move on to the next clip where he talks a little bit more in detail about all of this.
So I don't think anything's fundamentally changed since the last fintech boom, right? So last boom, what were we looking at? Payments, wallets, remittances, embedded finance. And I think that these drivers still apply. You know, I think one thing that we forget is the unevenness of growth across the continent. So we talk about Kenya with 95% M-Pesa, you know, in terms of transactions, right? 95% digital. But across the continent, you know, the stat is actually only 10% is digital. So we're still dealing largely with cash economies for large parts of the continent. And as the fundamental demographic shifts and, you know, mobile money still increases penetration, I think we're going to start to see continual growth from the businesses that we've seen do so well in both Nigeria and Kenya. So I don't think those things are going to go away. I think they're going to carry on being really, really successful strategies across the next 5 to 10 years. I will just add that as well as those sort of quite big, you know, scale businesses that we've talked about, I'm also seeing really strong narrow fintechs start to grow up as well. And typically we're seeing those in places like Kenya, where some of the biggest stories have already happened. So we see small lenders really specializing in underwriting a particular type of risk and getting really, really, really good at it. One company, Jackfruit, they've made a commercial model of lending to private schools. No one ever lent to these schools before, and suddenly they can make the economics of this work, and they can start to do that at scale without a single default. So we're starting to see more companies like that who really know their business. They're not interested in scaling all across the continent all in a year, but they're really good at their job. So I think that's another trend. So breadth as well as depth is what we're seeing.
So the interesting thing really with blockchain is it's creating entirely new markets. It's creating markets out of things that weren't feasible to create markets out of previously. We interviewed Daniel Friedman on what he's doing in regards to, essentially creating a commodities exchange using and utilizing the blockchain, enabling markets that didn't have access to capital to actually gain those accesses now. So we're, there's no doubt that this technology is changing the world. Who is going to be the main beneficiary is one question from a sort of geopolitical point of view, and what blockchain is going to capitalize the most on it. And I actually think Cardano is put in a very good position. You've got to remember, Cardano really is a technology for change. For those of you that listen to Charles Hoskinson, you'll be well aware of that and well aware of the vision for Cardano and how it plans in many ways to liberate people from this sort of oligarchical tech Silicon Valley-like world. So let's play the final clip and then we're going to wrap the video up. This was something I found very interesting and thought I should share.
Quickly, to your original question that you didn't ask, which is, what can Africa learn from the rest of the world? I will just say very quickly on that, we've already seen the story of Uber, of Airbnb, all of these big platform companies that always believe that they can scale their way to better unit economics, which just does not work. And I worry that we haven't learned some of those lessons with some of the big fintech stories that we're seeing across the continent. So there is a lesson I think that we probably should learn from that. Back to your actual question, I think there is a huge opportunity for us to assemble a much more vibrant financial ecosystem from the very fact that we never had ginormous banks that did the full service. The fact that we can look across the continent and see countries filled with banks that are uninterested in providing finance to SMEs is an opportunity as much as it is a constraint. So I think as we see some of these really exciting new entrants, these fintech players, start to become real experts at their one particular thing, I hope to see basically an ecosystem assembled from all of these companies that's more than the sum of its parts, that has competition built in by default, rather than something that we have to break up later with competition commissions.
All very interesting, and it's nice to see that John O'Connor and IOG are still very much vested in Africa. Cardano ultimately is a technology for change. It's a way for us to decentralize and verify rather than just trust me, bro. The world essentially. And I think that that's becoming more and more of a thing. The application for distributed ledgers is far beyond just money. It is as transformative to the financial sector as the agricultural revolution was to agriculture. You're going to replace a lot of jobs with distributed ledgers. And then, of course, we've got AI and everything to contend with that we'll look for and talk about a lot more on this channel moving forwards. So that's really all I've got for you guys. Interesting for me to hear from John O'Connor, who has been, I think, rather quiet, in my opinion. I think the whole Cardano Africa thing has been rather quiet. But it's nice to get some news in regards to all of that. And we thought we'd share that with you on the channel today. If you've enjoyed this content, a like is always appreciated. So is a comment. And don't forget, you can, if you have Cardano, stake to our Cardano stake pool, all in. We've been running for a long time. We plan on being here well into the future. So that's all I've got for you guys. If you enjoyed the content, like us, appreciate it, so as a comment, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Thanks for watching. See you in the next.